Uh, President Trump, of course, he brings surprises and is unpredictable. Prime Minister Modi thinks out of the box. And when both these leaders come together, it is not going to be one of those, familiarity summit, because they are
Mhm.
already familiar with one another. Some positive outcomes in terms of defense and security cooperation, including further strengthening the resolve of Quad to maintain peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, are going to come up.
You're watching The Gist on Strat News Global. I'm Ramananda Sengupta. Today, we're going to be discussing Prime Minister Narendra Modi's upcoming visit to the US. And our very, very special guest today is Dr. Chintamani Mahapatra. He's the founder and honorary chairperson of the Kalinga Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies. He's a former Pro VC and professor of international studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. And he's also the editor of India Quarterly, the flagship publication of the Indian Council of World Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure.
So let's take it right from the top. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting the US. I think he's having dinner with Donald Trump on the 13th. What should one expect from that?
This is a difficult time for the world, for the US and the American people, even for India to a large extent. At this time, when the two wars are still going on, one is having a kind of fragile ceasefire in West Asia, the other one is still ravaging on in Ukraine, and then the global political economy is not doing well. This meeting between India, whose economic growth rate is still pretty impressive, although it is slowing down, it is still the fastest growing economy in the world. And the US, under President Trump, will always try to give priority to trade and business and other economic relationship with the rest of the world. This particular meeting is very, very important for both the countries.
Mhm. But
Probably
what should
even
be the expectations that we have? So, what should one expect?
one expectation is uh, how to manage the differences that cropped up between the two countries during the Biden administration. And the other one is to move forward with kind of understanding that Prime Minister Modi had with Trump 1.0 administration, and how to move ahead further in the field of defense security cooperation, and more particularly in maintaining peace and stability and openness and freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific, which is right now undergoing certain amount of turbulence. So I think the main expectation is India-US relationship should continue, move ahead, and the strategic partnership which has been built painstakingly over the decades should be pushed further ahead.
So, just ahead of meeting next week, we have had this issue of deportations of Indians, illegal aliens, as they call them in the US. Do you think that will have any impact on the talk, the optics of that?
I think the impact is going to be rather positive. India has given signals from the very beginning that anything which is illegal, anyone who is doing illegal activities, should not be supported by the state. And this is what was told by Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar when he was interacting with the American Secretary of State. And later it was made very clear by the government of India and even by the leaders that India is prepared to accept all those Indians who have migrated to the United States without any documentation. So instead of creating any kind of differences, I think government of India's position should otherwise please the Trump administration, that we are prepared to go ahead and cooperate in deportation of the illegal migrants to India.
hmm So, as a quick aside, something that's always intrigued me. We have a similar kind of a setup vis-a-vis, let's say, deportation of prisoners in Pakistan and other places. But the problem arises when they are asked to prove their identity. that we need to verify that they're Indians to begin with. That usually takes time. In this case, this seems to have been done in a bit of a hurry. You think our government did this as a token one-off thing, or do you think they're actually going through the process of there's about a few million Indians who are supposed to be now living illegally in the US. Are they going to deport all of them, and are we going to sit there and go through all their documents?
At the moment, there is a list of about 18,000 Indians who are
Hmm.
apparently undocumented migrants from India in the US,
Right.
and others are, I think that is just a kind of guesswork. About 700,000 Indians are living there, as per the
Hmm.
Pew Research, data. But at the moment, I think the number is 18,000. 100 of them came only yesterday, and it was made very clear to them that India would accept only those individuals who are truly Indians. So when the plane landed in Amritsar, the check, detailed checking was done, and some of them could be identified as people from certain states in India. So Indian diaspora around the world, run into millions, and there are many Indians who may be from Kenya or from Fiji or from Suriname migrating to the United States. They look like Indians, they're ethnic
Right.
Indians, they're not from India. So government of India says that if anybody from India has migrated and we have the proof, we'll heartily welcome them back to India.
Oh, okay. That I mean, puts a new sort of a spin on it. So, from what I understand, South Bloc, as in Ministry of External Affairs, seems very upbeat and confident about this particular visit. I mean, most of the people keep saying, "Oh, we've dealt with President Trump before, so it's easy. We know how to work with him." Do you think that is justified right now?
It is justified to some extent. It is
Hmm.
justified because apparently the rest of the world, probably except Israel and Netanyahu, are
Hmm.
disturbed about Trump 2.0 administration. Trump talks very tough all the time, is pretty unpredictable. That is known to everyone, and he
Hmm.
could be strict on the American people. So one can expect that he can be strict on any other people from any part of the world. Having said that, one of the important areas where the relationship between countries move ahead comfortably is when the leadership in both the countries they get along well. And in this particular case, the personal chemistry between Prime Minister Modi of India and, of course, President Trump in the US appear to be pretty good. So, when the attention at the highest level is given to different aspects of the relationship between any two countries, then it becomes easy for the two countries to move ahead in a cooperative direction and at the same time deal with the differences, respecting each other. So the confidence that emanates from MEA is because even during Trump 1.0 administration, there were many people who thought that Prime Minister Modi is going to the US. We don't know how he's going to treat him. It turned out so well that ultimately, people keep citing two examples of Howdy Modi in Houston
Yes.
and Namaste Trump in Ahmedabad. You know, these are symbolic, but at the same time indicative of the personal chemistry between the leadership who want the relationship to move ahead and become stronger. So that is
Hmm.
why the MEA appears to be pretty confident that we are going to sort out differences with the US, but at the same time, we are going to build on the relationship that we have between the two countries.
Hmm. So, one of the things that one keeps hearing all the time is that the Indian diaspora in the US has it punches way above its weight in terms of numbers, in terms of political clout as well as influence. How much of a factor is that in this whole relationship?
Uh, First of all, I would say that the Indian diaspora in the US, who are American citizens, you know, we should always consider them to be American citizens and not part of Indian diaspora alone.
Hmm.
Indians naturally celebrate any people of Indian origin occupying a high position in an administration and say, oh, so and so is an Indian and he is now so and so in the administration. I think this is not the right way to look at it. However, I would like to emphasize that the Indian community in the US, some of them, when they occupy important positions in the administration, in the world of industry and IT sector, even in medical sector, in the universities, it becomes so easy for the Indian Americans to hold dialogue with India and understand each other better. Often we see in the relationship between the two countries, the officials complain that we don't understand the other country properly. But when the officials themselves they understand the other country, then the relationship becomes stronger and more cooperative. Misunderstanding can be removed easily. So that way, I would say that the Indian diaspora in the US,
Hmm.
those who are already citizens and they're occupying good official positions, it is going to be a bridge, a very positive bridge in the interactions between India and the United States.
Hmm. That's a positive thing to hear, sir, because apart from I suspect, I mean, there are a lot of other nationalities too which wield so-called lobby powers in the US, and I think we are doing a pretty decent job. In fact, I understand we've teamed up with the Jewish community to learn how to lobby. But so let's move to China. There is this strong and increasingly growing rumor that President Trump and President Xi of China might strike some kind of a deal soon, which sort of ends their trade war, which is going on at the moment. How likely is that? And if it does happen, how does that impact, if at all, India-US relations?
First of all, I would like to say that many people believe that the United States is following a policy of containment of China. Even the Chinese apparently believe very strongly that the US administration's successive governments in the US, they try to contain the growth of China. I see it in a different way. I find that the Chinese government, which is trying to contain the United States, because they know that the US is a global power, it is a superpower, it is a primary leader in most parts of the world, and because China
Hmm.
is growing very fast, it is rather trying to shrink the area of American primacy. So it is quite natural that when two countries are aspiring to become the global leader and they have a tremendous amount of capability to compete with each other in the military sector, in the technology sector, even in the economic sector, certain amount of tension is bound to take place. However, other countries which want to befriend with both China and the US, they become concerned when China and the US, enter into an area of conflict. So in the Indo-Pacific region, even in Europe, in other parts of the world, we find that countries often complain, if China is an important economic partner for us, the United States is a security provider. If they fight with one another, what kind of position we are going to take? Both are important for us. So if this has been the complaint of many countries, then it should be
Hmm.
easy for them to settle down that look, China and the US are not going to fight; they are going to cooperate. Then what is there to worry about it? However, there are other countries which feel that if US and China are going to collaborate to an extent where they want to have a kind of sharing, sharing the responsibility of ruling the world, then it becomes a cause of concern, kind of condominium over the world. It is not going to happen. The
Of
two
course.
countries are going to compete in many sectors. There are areas of conflict which cannot be resolved overnight. So we don't want the US and China to fight, but at the same time,
Hmm.
we don't want them to cooperate to an extent of having some kind of condominium with the rest of the world. So I think India is very carefully, walking the tightrope. We don't want to make an enemy out of China. We want to befriend China with them, with China as well, and trying to resolve our own differences with China. But at the same time, the United States is an extremely important strategic partner of India. So we are watching the relationship between the US and China very carefully to ensure that India's interests are protected.
Hmm. So, just before the Biden administration ended, the last visit to India by Jake Sullivan, their NSA, do you think that is symbolic of a sort of a continuity in ties, particularly when it comes to technology and other things? And was it just a token visit as something scheduled in advance?
Actually, the relationship between countries continue for a long gestation period because changes in the administration every 4 years or every 5 years should not be disrupting the relationship. So, although Jack Sullivan happened to be an outgoing security advisor, when he came to India, he was representing the U.S. government, and the relationship in the field of technology, in the field of defense cooperation, in the field of arms purchases, which have been building on for a long time. He wanted to continue that. So it is more of a
Mhm.
continuity than setting any new agenda. He did not promise anything new. He could not have. But at the same time, it symbolized that India and the US will collaborate. After all, everybody knows very well that there is bipartisan support in the US to maintaining cordial ties with India. There is bipartisan, I'll say rather multi-partisan consensus in India that the United States is an important country to maintain strategic partnership. So
Mhm.
I would read in that particular visit a kind of continuity in the relationship between India and the US.
Mhm. So also at the same time, we have President Trump taking very strong positions on, let's say, Russia and the Ukraine war, on Iran, and as well as West Asia. How do those positions impact the bilateral relationship, if at all?
I am of the opinion that Russia is an important strategic partner of India. So is the
Mhm.
United States. We are not going to trade one country against the other. During the Biden administration, through the Ukraine war, many people gave an impression that India is going close towards Russia. It is not condemning Russian aggression in Ukraine, it is buying Russian oil. But I think the Indian diplomacy was depth. We could convince the West that even the European countries continue to buy oil from Russia. So why you complain about India? India
Right.
has the need to buy a lot of energy, and if you're getting energy at a cheaper price, any other country would do. So it doesn't mean that we are supporting the war efforts. We have supplied humanitarian assistance to Ukraine as well. Our Prime Minister has repeatedly said that this is not the era of the war. That is not backing the war. So in future also under Trump administration, will continue to maintain our strategic autonomy, try to improve ties with the United States. At the same time, Russia will remain an important partner of India. Sometimes diplomatic tightrope, but it depends on the diplomatic abilities of countries to convince other powers that being partner with one is not necessarily against the other.
Mhm. So we mentioned, areas where we are going to cooperate and areas where we might have slight sort of, misunderstandings. Trade and tariffs, I suppose, would be the highest on both the sides, concerns over tariffs and concerns over whether. Okay. Apart from that, is there anything specific that India should worry about or should have a concern about?
There
I
are
mean,
two
I'm
things.
talking about, let's say, things like this Khalistani thing that was going on and other small hiccups like that. Would they have an impact on this?
Actually, we have quite a few concerns. One, you mentioned very correctly that how the Khalistani extremists, and some of them are terrorists, they are moving around freely in Western countries and taking advantage of the democracy in those countries in the name of free speech. They are making statements which are not only sacrilegious, they are threatening and very, very disruptive. And we would like the Trump administration to understand that this is an important issue that needs to be resolved. They should not allow the Khalistani elements who are otherwise American citizens to go and threaten the Indian diplomats or even create problems for the Indian community there or even deface the temples. So, this is an important area of concern. Second thing is they have a commission on international religious freedom, and the people who write the report, all those reports are just collection of facts and nothing but that. There's no interpretation, there's no understanding. They don't hear the other side of the story. They just put the facts together and make it speak. And that way, there are many complaints that we have, and we have repeatedly said that these are very, very unfair things to do. write the reports and put the blames on the government on democratic countries like India. So they should not do that. Third thing is a kind of narrative that is going on in the US, particularly by a section of people who are repeatedly saying that the Indian diaspora, particularly the Indian, immigrants. They are taking away the jobs of the American people, which is wrong. I think the Indian H-1B visa holders, they go and do a job, and that job is not competitive with the local American citizens. Rather, it is sharing different areas. Indian companies are creating jobs there. Indian companies are following all the rules. So, but the narrative is different, as if Indians are going and taking away the jobs of the local people, and this narrative has to be corrected. And this is another important concern on immigration. As I said, illegal immigration, nothing illegal should be accepted by anyone, and we should do something about it. But at the same time, the legal immigration should be encouraged. It is a win-win for the US and for India, and this should be protected and maybe promoted further.
Mhm. Essentially, what I'm hearing from you is a very, very sort of an upbeat and positive kind of a thing, barring these minor hiccups that you mentioned. But so there's another sort of a area which I have been hearing, let's say, contradictory reports. That is the Quad. Immediately after the inauguration, there was a meeting of the Quad ministers and things like that. But what happens to the Quad, sir? I mean, is it still going to be the force that it is? Is it going to be strengthened? Is it going to be, you know, toned down by Trump? Is it high on his priority list?
Let me point out two important developments which indicate very clearly that Quad is going to stay even under Trump 2.0 administration. Number one, the first meeting by the new American Secretary of State Marco Rubio was with the Quad foreign ministers. A few hours after taking oath, he held the first meeting with the foreign leaders, and those were the foreign ministers of India, Japan, and Australia. Secondly, when Prime Minister Modi and President Trump they held a telephonic conversation, Quad came up. One of the reasons why Quad is going to continue is because it was President Donald Trump during his first administration. He revived Quad, which is almost in a dormant stage for about 10 years. And all credit should go to his administration for understanding the importance and significance of Quad and revive it. In fact, Joe Biden, later his successor, he elevated the Quad interaction to the level of the summit. There is absolutely no reason why the Trump 2.0 administration should abandon Quad. I think that in 2025, this particular year, when India is going to hold the summit meeting towards the later part of the year, President Donald Trump probably will visit India to attend the summit of the Quad
Mhm.
leaders. However, there is one little thing that we have to watch. Quad is not a mechanism to contain China. India has made it very clear. Even the US administration doesn't want to make it appear as if it is a bulwark against China. Quad has an agenda which is much more than China. So certainly, Quad leaders are concerned about the flexing of naval muscle by China in South China Sea and their illegal, I would say, illegal claims of sovereignty on certain islands, the bulldozing of the smaller neighbors there. We are concerned about it. But Quad has a much bigger agenda. So that is why I would say that Quad will continue. There may be certain differences in certain areas, but I'm seeing it in a very positive way. It is going to grow further.
Do you see any internal differences between the Quad members over what the Quad should be?
No, no, no. There are no internal differences. The fact remains that out of these four member countries of Quad, the US is a strategic alliance partner of Japan and Australia. India is not an ally. India is a strategic partner. In a way, India is the odd man out of this particular grouping. So
Right.
India maintains strategic autonomy, whereas the other three are committed alliance partners. So on certain issues, there may be some differences here or there, but in the larger context of the Indo-Pacific, the need to maintain peace, stability, and ensure freedom of navigation, there there are no differences at all.
That's good to hear, sir, because there was some talk about how Quad is not very high on the agenda of the administration because it has so many other things to worry about. So we're almost running out of time. So let me end with one last question. Um, in your view, what do you think is going to be the biggest takeaway from this particular summit? What is the one big ticket thing that you expect Mr. Modi to come back with, saying this is what we've done?
There are indications about the outcome of the incoming summit between Prime Minister Modi and Trump. President Trump, of course, he brings surprises and is unpredictable. Prime Minister Modi thinks out of the box. And when both these leaders come together, it is not going to be one of those, familiarity summit, because they are
Mhm.
already familiar with one another. Some positive outcomes in terms of defense and security cooperation, including further strengthening the resolve of Quad to maintain peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, are going to come up. India has given enough indications that on certain trade issues, we are going to make some compromises and reduce our own tariff. I think some new initiative for enhancing economic relationship in the field of even technology and innovation are going to be announced. So believe me, it is not going to be one of those summit. It is going to be as important as previous visits by our Prime Minister to the United States.
Uh, on that note, let me conclude this particular interview. Thank you so very much for joining us, sir, and I look forward to having you with us again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
That was Dr. Chintamani Mahapatra, one of India's foremost international relations specialists and academics, demystifying the visit of Prime Minister Modi to the United States next week. I do hope you enjoyed this particular edition of The Gist, and I look forward to having you with us again. Till then, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is Ramananda Sengupta signing out.